One of the biggest mistakes that people in our business make when they communicate with one another is that they think of it as an isolated event. Good communication is not an event, it's actually a process. We have to keep in mind that the process involves at least two people. It's not a one-way or one-sided situation. We also have to remember that the main purpose behind communication in the first place is the exchange of information. The process actually looks something like this. First, there's the transmission of an idea. It might be simple or it could be complex, but it's an idea and we have to make sure that we communicate the whole thing. Second, we send the idea via a medium. We can speak it, write it, email it, memo it, letter it, broadcast it. The choices we have to send the idea will only be limited by our resources and our imaginations.
So you're telling me
The
that
message
you did
must
take the
be
wallet.
received. Someone,
Okay. Do you have some
somewhere
identification,
has to
sir?
get the message, or the whole process is pointless.
Okay, thank you.
Fourth,
So you're
once
telling me that you
received,
took this.
the message has to be understood.
Do you have some identification,
Questions
sir?
need to be answered, fine points may need to be clarified. Fifth, the receiver of the message must send confirmation back that the message was received and understood. This return message is called feedback. To be effective as a communicator, you must make sure that all 5 steps have been followed. If any one step is left out, overlooked, or assumed, we have the beginnings of a communications breakdown. Good communication is just as important to the mission that we perform as security professionals. In addition to the process, we must also be aware that communication runs in channels and in 2 directions. The first channel is the formal one. That consists of such things as orders, procedures, policies, rules, and directives. These are the kinds of communications that run a business. The other type of channel is the informal one. It is sometimes referred to as the grapevine or even the rumor mill. It's interesting to note that the organizations that have a good system for their formal communications do not have a very active grapevine. There's no need, but companies and departments that have a poor system of formal communication seem to have huge and extremely active grapevines. The reason for this is really quite simple. People need to know what's going on in the place where they work. If they cannot find out from the normal channels, they'll make use of whatever information source is available to them. When you spend a third of your life in a setting or location, it helps to know what kinds of things are impacting that place. That should give you some idea of just how important good communication is to the people you work with. When it comes to communication direction, we only have 2 choices at work. Orders, procedures, and personnel information are examples of downward communication. Performance information and clarification information usually flows upward. Let's talk now about communications and courtesy. Common courtesy is becoming so uncommon that you have to wonder how it ever got the name. In the security business, it can mean the difference between a positive contact with a client or a negative one. Being courteous is not something that we should consider as an extra on the job. It's something that should be a part of everything we do as security officers. It is so critical to our image that I'm convinced that it's something that our clients have every right to expect from us. Here are some examples of simple guidelines to follow that will help make you a more courteous officer. First, always introduce yourself by title and name at the start of any contact with a citizen. It's the appropriate thing to do, and it sets a positive and business-like tone early in the conversation. Second, watch your tone of voice. It's usually not what an officer says that gets them into trouble, it's how they say it. Your tone of voice should never betray anger, contempt, sarcasm, or other inflections that are likely to provoke a negative response. Third, be careful with the form of address you use. Citizens and clients should be addressed as Mr. or Mrs., Sir or Ma'am. Don't use first names unless circumstances clearly make that appropriate. Fourth, watch your body language. Stand or sit up straight. Remember that inappropriate body language is easy to see. You can communicate as much as 90% of your message through body language. Make sure that it fits well with the verbal communication. Fifth, There are no circumstances where it's appropriate to use profanity on the job. It's always offensive and always unprofessional. Number 6, never lower yourself to the level of making demeaning remarks about anyone. Remember what your mother told you. If you can't find something nice to say about someone, be quiet. Or, as an old college professor used to say, don't miss an opportunity to shut up. Number 7, take a moment when you can and explain to people why we're doing what we're doing. Often a simple, straightforward explanation about why or what we're doing goes a long way toward getting people to understand and sometimes even help. Number 8, remember, as much as 70% of your time on the job is spent communicating with others. The only way that you can become better at it is to practice. Let's talk now about interpersonal communications. The ability to communicate clearly and concisely is the most important single skill that a security officer can have. The reasons are really quite simple. First, without communication, there is no coordination. Second, without coordination, there's no organization. Third, communication doesn't happen unless some consideration is given to the emotional needs of the recipient. Communications between persons and groups is a rather delicate and involved process that involves a basic understanding of the following factors. First, cultural differences. Second, environmental differences. And third, psychological differences. The processes of communication are the symbols, signs, and means that we use to translate an idea to someone else. First, words are nothing more than symbolic representations of something. Second, words that the recipient of the communication cannot associate with a past experience are meaningless. Third, words are, as a matter of fact, inherently imprecise. Let's talk about understanding the barriers to communication. With all the things there are to get in the way of good communication, it's a wonder that anything gets communicated at all. We as security professionals understand some of the bigger barriers to effective communication, and we can take steps to eliminate the ones we can and work around the ones we can't. The basic barriers to effective communication include the following. First, a failure to listen. Most people listen for the opportunity to say what they want to say. They don't really listen to the person who's talking. Second, status differences. Rank and status make us listen to some people more closely than we listen to others. Third, psychological size. People with take charge types of personalities get listened to more than those who are normally quiet and reserved. 4, noise. Distractions, sounds, lights, movement, all these things can cause us to lose focus on the speaker. Language barriers can be created by what's called a lack of lucidity. If you're being lucid, you're being easily understood. The problem is that we all speak English. Well, sort of. Don't assume that everything you say is perfectly clear to the receiver. Second, use a little empathy and put yourself in their place. 3, the 500 most commonly used words in the English language have about 14,000 meanings. That's 28 meanings per word. Now, fear of criticism can get in the way too. No one likes to be thought of as missing the point. So consider this. A positive response, shaking your head up and down in response to a communication, is a way of avoiding criticism for not getting it. Second, it leaves the back door open for a retreat. Nobody likes to be thought of as a little slow on the uptake. Jumping to conclusions is a favorite practice of security officers. Try to wait until you have enough information before making up your mind. Let's talk about filtering. Filtering, which is comparing something to a personal frame of reference, can also cause distortion or dilution of content. We all have a tendency to see things based on our own life experience. We filter and take out what we don't want, and we add the things the way our experience has told us they're supposed to be. Filtering isn't wrong, but it may not be accurate either. Some departments still have a nasty habit of trying to kill the messenger when the communication is not a happy one. When that happens, the organization doesn't get any news for fear that it could be bad. Sometimes the manipulation or suppression of communication is done intentionally. When that happens, it's on the same level as sabotage on a piece of equipment, and it can be very destructive. All communication passes through a system called a communication net. It comes to us from all over the place and must be properly filed and coded. Sometimes these channels of communication can be overloaded. For example, information is jammed up, or some information is just plain lost. Overstructuring communication can cause problems as well. Making the process too formal can create backlogs and missed communication opportunities. Let's turn our attention for a few moments to overcoming some of those communications barriers. Once you know the dangers, you can be about the business of avoiding them. The following is a list of the things you can do to eliminate as many errors and communications barriers as you can. First, determine your objective. Make sure that you know what it is you're trying to say. Be clear about the message and the method. Second, adapt your language and method to the task. You can't effectively communicate all things in the same way. Third, pay some attention to the setting that the communication occurs in. Try to eliminate as many distractions as you can. Fourth, time the message properly. Fifth, practice some empathy. Put yourself in the other person's place. Sixth, obtain feedback. The communication cycle is not really complete without it. 7, keep yourself and those around you informed. The more people know, the easier it is to communicate with them. 8, be trustworthy. The people you deal with should be able to bank on what you say. 9, make your actions speak louder than your words. Practice what you preach. Walk the talk. 10, listen. Seek to understand if you wish to be understood. Let's talk for a few minutes about written communications. The ability to write well is directly tied to a security officer's competency in the eyes of his or her supervisor. Writing involves nothing more than the organization of thoughts or ideas in an understandable manner. It's not nearly as hard as some people make it out to be. Here are some things to remember about written communication. First, clarity of expression is the most important element in writing. Be explicit. Get to the point. Second, simplicity of writing style helps clarity. Use short, simple sentences, simple words, and proper punctuation. Third, be accurate. There's no excuse in the security profession for inaccurate writing. Fourth, arrange your thoughts in a logical manner. Using a checklist sometimes helps. So does writing things down in the order that they occurred. Fifth, style counts too. Try to be yourself. Remember that every written message has a beginning, a middle, and an end. 6, conclusions are important. It's your last chance to make your point. Don't waste it. 7, use the format accepted and used by your department. It helps to stay with the program that everyone else is used to. Now, there are 3 reasons why written communications often fail. First, the inability of the reader to tell the difference between fact and non-fact. If it's an opinion, it should be marked as one. If it is a fact, it should be written like a fact and not like a question or a comment. Second, a failure to use the most specific and concrete words possible. Flowery dialogue might look spiffy in a romance novel, but it has no place in an official communication. State your business with as few words as possible and use words that mean what you want them to mean. Third, a failure to support conclusions with factual data. Back up what you say. It adds weight to your point and it makes the point that much harder to forget. Communications equipment. The equipment used by the modern security officer to communicate with a central dispatch center or with other officers just keeps getting better and better. As good as the equipment gets, it still must be operated in a proper manner to be effective. That's why the following guidelines need to be understood, regardless of the type or style of communication system that you're using. First, any electrical device is subject to malfunction. That means that you should test all radios prior to a shift and all telephones at least once every week. Second, If it operates on battery power, make sure that the battery is properly charged. If it's a radio or radio assisted, it has limited range. You need to know what those limits are. You also need to know where those places called dead spots are. Those are the places where a radio signal cannot get in or out due to a variety of reasons. Fourth, no matter the quality of the unit being used, it won't work well if you yell into it. Speak directly into the mouthpiece of a telephone and across the microphone of a radio. Fifth, radios are to be used to convey information, not conduct conversations. If what you have to say will take longer than a 30-second radio transmission, call the person on the phone. 6. When you talk on the phone, remember that it is the link that forms the impression for the person on the other end. That means you need to do the following things. First, identify the location reached, the person speaking, and make an offer of assistance. If it sounds like, front gate, Officer Smith speaking, can I help you, then that's what you're looking for. Second, take notes about phone conversations and read them back to the caller to make sure that you got it right. Third, thank the person before you hang up. Remember always that a work phone is just that, a phone used for work. Keep personal calls to an absolute minimum. People are going to be calling with problems and concerns, and they're not going to want to hear a busy signal or to have to wait to get through. When things go wrong, people like to be able to talk to other people. Make sure you are as available as you can be. Keep the communications lines open. When things get serious, we're going to have to be able to communicate with one another clearly and quickly. Emergency communications. In an emergency situation, it's going to seem like everything is happening all at once in the communications center. It's not unusual for security officers to get impatient with the comm center because they feel like they're being ignored. Usually, that's not the case at all. Follow these simple guidelines in an emergency and the communications process will go much smoother. First, calm down. Take a deep breath and think about what you're going to say before you say it. Second, key the microphone and count to 2 before you start talking. That gives the system time to fire up and make all the electronic connections that it needs to make. Third, speak in plain language. 10 codes and security slang are fine for regular operations, but should not be used in an emergency. You need to be clear and easily understood. Fourth, after your transmission, wait a moment for a response from the communications center. The dispatchers will be writing things down and hooking up other calls. Give them a few moments to do what they need to do before you start asking them additional questions. 5, be ready to repeat what you said. Don't get upset or anxious about this. Just repeat your original transmission the same way you did the first time if asked. 6, make sure you're absolutely correct about exact locations and conditions. 7, don't be vague about what you see or what kind of assistance you want sent to you. 8, if you hear another officer dealing with an emergency, stay off the radio. Now is not the time to engage in the routine stuff that might happen. The air has to be kept as clear as possible. 9, be professional. Keep your voice calm and easy to understand. Don't try to be cute or flippant. And 10, take notes. Make sure you log times and requests as they happen. It will be needed later to complete the report. Effective communication is going to do a number of good things for you and for the department. First, it's going to reflect on you as a professional. Your reputation is going to be established in large measure by how well you handle the emergencies that might occur in the workplace. Second, people who are around and listening will also make a judgment about your department based upon what they hear. What kind of an image do you want to project? Third, good communication can mean the difference between being effective and appearing incompetent. Information is the fuel that runs our profession. We need good fuel to run properly. Fourth, the communication practices that you employ will impact the quality of the information that will show up on your final report. It's kind of like a computer, garbage in, garbage out. Fifth, our communication practices will determine how well we relate to visitors, managers, employees, and our fellow officers. Good communication is vital to our success. Thank you for watching. I'm Bill Jackson, and I'll see you next time.